is the affordable housing presentation. I know David is here. Saw him come in. Come on down, David. Do you have
I
anyone
am
from your
here.
committee that would like to come
Yeah,
down and
I've
sit at the
invited
table?
them, but they're shy.
They're shy.
Come on. You earned this.
If I could sit in a comfortable chair.
That's the only one.
Hello, everybody.
Okay.
Bye.
So, the affordable housing plan. This is a plan required by state statute.
Right.
That the Planning and Zoning Commission is working with, I would say, probably relying on the Affordable Housing Committee to complete this report that has to be submitted by June.
June 1st.
First, not the last of June, but the beginning of. So time is of the essence on this, and David is here to give us a presentation on it.
Yes.
So thank you for your work. Thank you to all the committee members for your work and efforts. Greatly appreciated.
So you have the plan, and I hope you had at least a chance to crack it.
Yeah.
And I put together an overview because the plan is kind of dense. I don't know if you had a chance to read through that
Yeah,
as well.
we sent both.
So I can run through the overview quickly for you and answer any questions along the way, because this is basically a distillation of the full text.
Just to be, for my edification, is this gets submitted from planning and zoning, right? Is this the, no?
No.
It gets submitted
By the
by the
town.
town.
Okay, so it's our submission.
Right,
To-
but to be sure that the plan is completed and submitted on time.
Okay,
My understanding is that Planning and Zoning Commission will vote on it as well. So it's going to need the approval of P and Z and of this board before it can go to the state.
okay, so then it gets submitted to the state, and the state is just collecting these to see that the,
To be sure that we're in compliance with state statute.
They have a box there that they put them all in.
Yeah. Pretty much.
It's-
It seems like the idea is like, you know, we want you to
That's
think
what
about this, right?
Yes.
We want you to go through
Okay.
the
Yeah.
exercise, right?
But there are also some bills that are coming to the floor of the House, may not get onto the floor as the last time, but those would also create some more planning and things. So it's not really well sorted out how to deal with this, but this plan is a good opportunity and we take it very seriously. So I hope to have a chance to. Also, if we're going to have, we're not required by law to have a hearing, but if we are to have a hearing, there has to be 35 days. It can be no sooner than 35 days before it was filed with the town. So it was filed with the town last week, which means we're looking at May. If you want to do a hearing, and I think you should, the hearing should be, well, whatever 35 days is from now.
and to May.
And yeah, and that gives us a very little window. But we are planning next week 2 public meetings. There's one on Wednesday night in this room, and then there's one on Saturday morning in this room to gather public opinion.
So the public opinion would be reflected in this
Yeah, we've got-
draft in some way?
Yes,
Okay,
so we'll get your comments, we'll get public comments, we get comments from P and Z, and we'll update the draft as necessary.
What time are the meetings?
7 to 9 on Wednesday, and 10 to 12 on Saturday. That's the, what is it, the 20th and 23rd, I think, or the 20th, whatever it is.
This Saturday?
No, not this Saturday, the following
A week
Saturday.
from tonight, which is the 20th, and then
Right.
Saturday, which is, so it's the 20th and the 23rd,
Okay.
here in this office, in this,
Conference room.
So this is, you said you filed this with the town. This is what you filed, this draft?
At
Yes.
the town clerk's.
yes, it's in the town clerk's office. I also sent this as well. But eventually, this is going to be adapted into the executive summary. So right now, this is just sort of a set of bullet points
Mhm.
to make it easy to tell about it. So I can walk you through it.
Sure, whatever you want. The floor is
Sure.
yours.
So one thing that's really important to remember, I think, is that Ridgefield has always been growing and changing. You know, you had a very sparse rural community after the land was acquired from the original settlers. And then you had the railroad coming in the 1800s, had a big change in town. You had the cottages, the so-called cottages. And then you had immigrants coming from Europe to work and maintain the cottages. So there was a little bit of a boom then. There was another boom in the 50s. The population of Ridgfield quadrupled between 1950 and 1970, as you probably remember.
Here again.
No, I said the 1960s.
Ouch.
I'm
You
catching
were
up.
just an infant.
Yes, I was.
Then, you know, you had the big financial boom and then the bust, and that had an effect on the town and development. So it's always been changing, it's always been growing. So the question isn't, are we gonna grow? Because the answer is, we are gonna grow. Are we gonna change? Yes, we're gonna change. The question is, how do we do it? And the purpose behind this whole report is so we can do it our way. I mean, there are only two ways that we can answer the need for housing. And one of them is to have the state impose its solutions on us, and if you look at some of the bills going to the floor, those are very imposing, or to do it our way. And so to me, this plan is all about local control. It's about recognizing that we have to do something. This is about doing it our way. In the 40s, in the 30s and the 40s, towns decided they wanted to do it that way. They introduced zoning regulations. Zoning came into Ridgfield, I think, in 1946. This is from the first zoning map here on the left, see the picture. And zoning regulations let the town take control of growth and also let the towns create exclusion. And that's how we wound up with the pattern of segregation that we have in the state. State regulations, yes, have sapped local control. I am not a fan of 8-30G. I understand why they did it, but I think there are probably better ways to go about it. This plan will let us reclaim local control if we do it seriously and not just do it in a perfunctory fashion. And the ultimate goal is not to, quote, build affordable housing, but to create a more complete community. And I would urge you to look that up. In the plan, you'll find a lot of links, and there's a link on that. It's a way of thinking about planning and development that tries to shape a community that's whole, rather than just a single niche.
Yeah, there's a good definition, when I first read this, I went, what in the world does that mean? But in the more detailed
Yeah.
version, there's a good definition of what that means.
The state, I'm sorry, Bob?
You said something I'm really curious about. You said that this will give us local control, this plan. But we
It
have
will-
state mandates
Yes.
with 830G and then all the new ones that you've talked about that may or may not come
Right.
forward. So how are we going to have local control if those mandates come through? How does this plan help us avoid that?
Well, in the short term, if we take action within the next couple of years, we can have, if we take action right away, within the next couple of years, we could have another moratorium, for example. And that would move us 4 years down the road. The state is also considering looking at 8-30G now and reevaluating it, because,
It hasn't worked.
well, it hasn't worked as intended, let's
Right.
say. It's created 5,000 apartments, 5,000 affordable units in the state, but at what cost, really, is the question. So one of the things that's being discussed, and I support completely, is let the towns, or require the towns to set reasonable goals and to find a way to pursue them. You know, we have 8-30G, and then we have the state telling us, create a plan, but the plan has no teeth in it. What has been proposed and what people are talking about is this alternative. Let towns find their own ways to meet their goals, but kind of hold their feet to the fire so they actually do it. I don't think there's anyone that agrees that 8-30G is a good solution, so letting towns do it ourselves is probably a better way to do it.
You know, is there any, I had a meeting today with the COG and with Reading Weston.
Huh?
talking about Georgetown, TOD, and that whole area as a partnership, is there any discussion about, one, changing the system of credits that you get? For example, you only get a half a point for this or a point for that, and how the state does it. I think for like senior affordable,
You get half a point.
you get a half a point.
Unless it comprises less than 40% of the entire development, then you get .75.
So why did they do that? Why don't they just give you credit for having an affordable unit? I mean,
Because-
seniors are as important as the younger
Is
generation.
the feeling that was just gonna happen naturally and they don't wanna,
No, and as a senior, I completely concur with that, but the issue is that when towns feel pressure to create affordable housing, what they do is they tend to create senior housing because
There's a need.
that was my point,
I
like,
hear
that's
you.
gonna happen
I hear
anyway,
you.
yeah.
I think 8-30G is gonna get a look at, and I can tell you that I'm going to support the idea of setting aside 8-30G in favor of towns pursuing their own plans, provided the plans, meet a certain threshold
Right.
of effectiveness.
But I guess one question is, well, who sets those goals? You said before, like, the town should set the goals.
Well,
Right, because is it the state, because right now, the state is setting a goal, you may question how we achieve that goal, but my guess is if our town, in and of ourselves, were to create our own goal, it would be different than what the state would suggest.
probably.
Is that, yeah?
Probably. What the bill, I forget what number it is, but what it does is empower the COGS to create a formula to apportion need throughout their service area, and then to basically give that to the towns as their requirement. Obviously, the regulation doesn't say this is how you do it, it says figure out a way to do it, which is what they always do. So then it would go to the COG would work with the towns to create their own local targets, and then the towns would be expected to achieve their targets, or at least have a plan that should get them towards their targets. WestCog created an affordable housing plan. It's not really a plan, you've seen it, it was sent to you, I'm sure.
Right.
It's 135 pages, it's really good. It's not a plan because it doesn't have any specific goals or strategies or tactics in them. But what they've done is they've invited towns that haven't taken the initiative to create their own plans to append to their own, I call it an annex. And some towns are doing that, with like Wilton's doing it, Sherman's
Right.
doing it.
It's basically to meet the deadline.
Right.
So they're just latching on to what the COG did and then
Right.
submitting that?
COG did a general
Right.
overview, and then each town is submitting an annex, as Dave said, to cover the submission for June 1st.
Right.
Right,
And they're all using the same template,
right,
which is the COG.
right. But going back to what we had been discussing about the need for senior affordable housing versus, would that be part of the plan? Or if the recommendation was to set aside 8-30G and then craft our own plan, would we have the ability to have that as a target goal?
That would happen at the state level.
So it's never gonna be local control, it's always gonna be at the state level?
Right.
That, I doubt it, because the cities really control the legislature.
Yeah,
And they
so,
won't open the door a crack. At least up till now, they haven't.
Right, but now that towns are required to have their own plans, people are looking at it a little bit differently. If the plans are serious and not just a two-page annex stapled to the COG plan, then there's a chance. And I think that if we pursue this plan, we'll be seen as a town that takes its responsibilities under the law seriously.
Yeah, I agree with you there. We're not taking the easy way out.
No,
So you think this may have some legs
I'm hoping, yeah,
for us individually, as a community?
absolutely.
You know, one question before we get too far, in your 1940 second bullet,
Yeah,
zoning regulations let the town take control of growth and create exclusion.
yes,
When they were created, Ridgfield had a lot of affordability, and the zoning was more zeroed in on commercial versus residential. How do we want to see our community grow? It wasn't for the purpose of creating exclusion.
well, it wasn't for the purpose of creating class or racial exclusion,
Any kind, socioeconomic
but it
exclusion.
was created with the idea of excluding multifamily housing.
Zoning exclusion, yeah, so that's also,
There's-
I had the same thought, I think in here it's defined as well, like,
Yeah.
what that, I don't wanna wordsmith this, but I think it's,
Right.
that word, it's, this word is doing a lot of heavy lifting here that we may not intend, because I
Are
think.
we given the impression that we created it for this
Correct,
purpose?
because yeah, when you look at the word exclusion, you start
Right.
going to lots of things. I think in the more detailed, when you talk about exclusion being, like housing exclusion, right? Zoning exclusion of
Well,
single versus
in some
multifamily.
places, it was done specifically for racial reasons.
But it wasn't done that way in Ridgefield.
No, I don't believe it was. I
Because
go back to.
back when.
Well, we
they-
had greater racial diversity back then than we do today.
Did you used to go to the meetings back? Yeah, you went to, you were on the board in 1946. Okay, I hear you, I understand that. It's an uncomfortable thing, but I also want to point out that it's completely true. And I will be happy to refer you to some jaw-dropping research that's been done on this. And I don't want to take too much time with that now. But one of the reasons that we're so far behind now is because of what happened then. And there's a lot of talk about, well, you're saying we're racist, you're saying we did this. No, not that at all. This is simply about fixing a problem that exists in Ridgefield and the state and the country.
Yeah.
I'll get off my high horse here and continue the presentation.
But that might be something that you want to look at, that perhaps create exclusion wouldn't be language that we'd want to include in this plan.
I agree.
Or at least define it the way, again,
Yeah,
the way it is here, because when you look at that, I think it sets people off in a very different direction.
I'll bubble wrap
than
it.
intended. Yeah.
Because it's nice to have aspirational goals and to look back and with your lens on certain, what happened in history, but this is a plan for us moving forward and
Right.
positive aspects that we should be doing in our community today. To cast aspersions on what
Consider-
happened before is just not
Consider
appropriate.
the word stricken.
Thank you.
Because at the time also, I just want to jump in on this too, at the time, people moved here because they moved to the country and there wasn't a need for multifamily development or housing here. And, and it's actually been, it's a recent, a relatively recent trend now for places like Ridgefield and Buchanan and Wilton, where we have areas where we put up multifamily because that's where there's a market demand. So I agree with everybody else. This wasn't, at the time, this wasn't exclusionary. People were moving here and the demand, the market dictated that we had, single family homes or,
There's
farms.
really a lot of estates with people
Right.
moving here, and then it created jobs.
Right.
And that was the big draw, that
Right.
worked on all the estates and the farms, et cetera.
Okay.
Anyway,
So the state has created a guide for towns to develop their plans, and they had some requirements, and one of them is a vision statement. So we worked to craft something that we felt the town could agree with pretty broadly. Ridgefield's small town charm is vitally important to residents. It's what makes Ridgefield Ridgefield. We aspire to be a complete and compassionate community, valuing all residents regardless of background or economic status and providing a diversity of housing types.
and that's one of the strengths of our community, and if you listen to Al Garza talk, as we do once a month at our revenue meetings, one of the things that sets Ridgefield apart from many, many communities is the housing diversity that we have in terms of, let's say, under 500,000. A lot of people are gonna say, geez, how many houses? And we have about 30% of our markets under 500. And a previous board member said, well, why do we need affordable housing? Well, not everyone can afford $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 for a home. But at the same time, it has pulled us through across the board in terms of our mix from under 500 to over 2 million. And if you look at our sales every month, you can see that, and it's good. It supports us very, very well.
On the next page, page 4, we also crafted a set of beliefs, because we had to, our process was to gather the data, then look at our vision and our beliefs or values to kind of filter the need through, right? So there were 4 of them here. It's important to maintain small-town charm, that housing stock needs to be more diverse, that racial and economic diversity is important for the town's vibrancy, and Ridgefield is a compassionate town where people care for and help each other.
All true.
So Ridgefielders at a glance, this recent census was a little bit of a mess, because first of all, they couldn't get to everybody. Right, you had COVID, and you also had a lack of cooperation in certain parts of the government. And then data's been coming in late. So through this plan, we're working with the best available data, but everything doesn't always line up exactly, and it's not always apples to apples. So keep that in mind. So population, which is 25,033, has been generally flat for the last few decades. The median age has climbed dramatically, though, from 37 in 1990.
That was a staggering
Yeah, I thought that was
statistic.
amazing.
Yeah, well,
That's
what's
huge,
happening is, people like me, and like some of you empty nesters, are not moving, because we don't have a really good place to go, no obvious place to go,
Maybe you
not,
don't want to leave.
I don't. So, right,
The right answer.
but also, I have more house than I need and I'm paying for it, and that's what a lot of people find, this, the situation that a lot of people find themselves in. I think when we create more affordable housing, the median age is gonna tick back down, because I'll move out, other people will move out, and families will move back in. So my 3-bedroom house will now have 3 bedrooms full instead of 1.
When your
Are you-
enrollment goes, excuse me,
Right.
from 57, 56, 5,700 down to 4,500, what kind of an impact does that have on the average age?
When school enrollment goes down, it raises it, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean,
Do you
everything
think
that.
that contributes a lot, or just a
A lot,
tiny?
well, it's a lot. Households, we have built housing, but household size has declined a little bit, even. It's empty nesters. The baby boom was an actual boom. There's a chart in here that's pretty amazing about how the baby boom bulge has just moved through the population.
Yeah.
And now, we have no place to go.
Okay, but you said that once we get affordable housing, you'll sell your house and a family will move into your 3 bedrooms, but are you envisioning you moving into the affordable housing that we're building, or you're moving somewhere else?
As soon as we build, well, we need to build more
The
housing
senior
in general.
Diverse housing.
No, I know that, right, but see that,
I do not qualify
Yeah.
for affordable housing.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot, I'm not asking you a financial situation, but you know what I'm saying? That doesn't, you need, what you would like to do is find a smaller residence somewhere else, so that you don't
Yes.
have a large home to maintain
Yes,
and the
but we
grass
don't
and
have
all of
those
that.
either.
In town.
But in town or somewhere else? Or you don't care?
I'd love to stay in Ridgefield.
Right, okay. So the answer to your, and a lot of empty nesters' issue is not affordable housing, it's finding a smaller house that they wanna live in.
Well, it's, I guess, an important distinction for me is the quote-unquote affordable housing versus broad affordable housing. Right, because I can see people saying, I've got this big house, I'm paying, a lot of money, big taxes, more space than I need. I don't qualify for quote-unquote formal affordable housing, but I want something that is more affordable, right? Can I, extract some value out of that?
That's where the market is.
That's, yeah.
Right, but
where
that's
the
not
market
affordable
is.
housing.
No, he's
I
talking about.
know that, yeah.
Right.
So
He's
to me,
talking-
one of the things that struck me as I was going through this is that, exactly that distinction, when you talk about the complete community, which I think is a really great concept, the complete, and again, I think we get caught up because the state is saying to do all these things, but if we didn't worry about the state, and if we really said, what's right for Ridgefield, we would want a more diverse range of, mix of housing options, which is different from pure quote-unquote affordable.
Subsidized house.
Subsidized housing, yes.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yes, and that's why we're trying to look at all housing in general, and naturally occurring affordable housing, NOAA housing, we
No,
call
yeah.
it, is very important, because that's a place where people who need more affordable housing but don't qualify for affordable housing can live.
Right, but I think one of the main concerns is just the way the town has aged, and you are looking at many empty nesters and people that are interested in downsizing. The answer to what they need is not affordable housing, in subsidized housing.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
I
So
think we
that's
need to make that
that's
distinction.
the pull here, the discussion, the toughness of this whole discussion,
Mhm.
right?
Well,
Okay.
we need more housing across the board, of all types, in the state, in the county, in the town. But we also especially need affordable housing, because those are people who are having to cut back on, food and clothing and medical care, because they don't have access to it. And, which gets me to a point, if I can continue, is, the town's median income is over $160,000. But there are a lot of households where people are struggling in town. We don't see it every day, we don't think it, because we drive by and we see the big houses on Main Street. 22% of the households are struggling, mostly invisibly.
That's Alice, right?
Well, that's Alice plus poverty. And these are people we know. I get calls all the time from people who have had a life change situation. A spouse leaves or dies, or there's a job loss, and they want to keep the kids in school. They
Can
don't
you
know someplace to
explain
go.
Alice to some of the people I mentioned?
Sure, we're gonna get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Actually, no, you know what, I don't get into a lot of detail in that here. Alice is asset-limited, income-constrained employed. That means people who are working, but who don't have a lot of assets and are struggling. What they do is they create a threshold budget for an area, and then they look at how many people, using census data, are above and below that budget to find out how many people are spending more than the threshold. And people who are spending more than the threshold in housing are considered Alice in that case. And that counts as 20% of the town. And the idea of being cost burdened, the general philosophy is, the general definition of affordable housing is, if you're spending more than 30% of your income on housing, including utilities, insurance, maintenance, the whole thing, then you are cost burdened. Now, there are a lot of people cost burdened, but we can take off of that list people earning over $80,000 or so, because if you're spending that, if you're earning that much money and you're spending 50% on a house, that may be fine. That's a choice you make. But if you're earning less than that, then it could be creating economic stresses for you. So 42% of renters and 28% of owners are cost burdened in Ridgefield.
Now, is that under 80,000, that number? Or
I
are you using?
No, I believe that's the 80,000 number. I put that in, it's in the big plan. But
But I thought from the big plan, I thought, again, I don't know exactly what
I
it
tried
is.
to-
I think you used the median income, and not, you didn't use an 80,000, I didn't say anywhere an $80,000 number. Because you're right, I mean, if you have a median household income of 160,000, you have a lot more disposable income, and those people would not be income burden or
Constrained, correct.
constrained, right? So you're
28% of ownership homes and 45% of rental homes. So that's an absolute.
So that's on page 13.
That's on page
in this-
13.
In this flip chart.
Regardless of the income.
But there's elsewhere where we've taken off, if you look at on page 14 on the right, what we did is we took off the $75,000 or more. So in Ridgefield, there are 1,232 owner households and 485 rental households with an income under $75,000 that are spending more than 30% of their income on housing costs. So,
Okay, but a bank would qualify somebody with that. Principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, that's what
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
number they
right.
use. Principal, interest, they will qualify you on gross income at 30 or 33%.
Right,
So that's not, the bank doesn't look at that as being income constrained. If you're spending 30% or 33% of your.
so that's the line.
Yeah.
So
Right.
there are people spending 40, 50% or more. So that's the issue. It's not about people who are just spending 30% of their income. And
Well, I think Bob's point is that the bank wouldn't,
Have
Mortgage,
given
a
them-
bank
right.
wouldn't, bank's not gonna lend on that.
50, 60%
Oh, I see.
burden.
Right, of course not.
Right.
Back in the 80s, they did because they did no income, no asset verification loans, and that's why we had the housing crisis in the 80s.
Right.
But I think they've learned their lessons and they don't do this.
But also the situation can change, right? You talk about, someone
Well,
that
sure.
had a job change, or, I can get a mortgage 15 years ago and then have a, job change or partner die or.
Something happens,
Yeah.
Right.
life changes.
So, just trying to blast through this to get to the recommendations. There are limited opportunities for adults with disabilities, and that shifts the burdens to the families, and we all know about that in Ridgefield. Ridgefield is also graying and falling, but housing opportunities for seniors are pretty limited.
Were you looking at me again?
We're
No,
gonna
I'm
take a lot of
looking
this tonight.
Single-family homes predominate, I'm on page 6 here. 80% of Ridgefield homes are single-family, 90% of single-family homes are owner-occupied versus 38% of multifamily. By the way the government counts it, a row house is considered single-family attached. So that's how they come up with their base numbers. 3.1% of Ridgefield homes are deed restricted or government assisted affordable versus the 10% 8-30G target, which is pretty much unattainable, at least in the near future. The supply of homes for sale is down and price is up as pandemic boosts the appeal of towns like Ridgefield. And you know that realtors are just scraping for listings right now.
By the way, so just back to something you said before, just on the notion of the pandemic. Obviously, we won't have data on this because of the way the census was done and when it was done. My sense is our probably average age has gone down because, at least from my own personal experience, I knew a number of people who were empty nesters who were, kind of real estate constrained, or they couldn't sell their houses for what they thought. Pandemic hit, prices went up, and a lot of those folks got out of town, replaced by, much younger families. So it's amazing to see the way it's grown, but my guess is it's gotta have come down at least some.
Yeah, I think the 2020 census, the ACS numbers that follow the census, the annual estimates
That's
are
right,
gonna be more meaningful than the actual census numbers this time around. So I think that's absolutely true.
So, again, I don't want to be argumentative here, but this is actually a positive and it's a healthy reflection on the town that we have great diversity of housing. Even, again, a bank, when you look at a condominium, the large developments, they will limit the amount of investor or rental properties that you can have within that, because they tend to, if you have a high propensity of renters in a condo, you have problems making the homeowner association fees, and you have a lot more delinquencies and those types of things. So I think, single-family homes predominate, 80% of Ridgefield is single-family. I think that's a good thing.
Okay. So the real question is how much affordable housing do we need? How much more affordable housing do we need? And there have been a bunch of analyses done, and you go into some detail in the plan, and then you can click in the plan links to those individual reports. But there are roughly 4 analyses, maybe more, and they usually come in between 1,200 and 2,000 units of additional affordable housing. The waiting list for the,
This is a place where I guess I had a real problem with this, because when you look at some of these things, and tell me if I'm reading this wrong, these are not studies that look at our community and say, what is really the need in our community? It looked like there were things across the state that said, we think the state needs so much, here's your share. And so to me, it feels like these numbers, like the 1,200, 2,000 units, I can see a couple pages here, right, section 7. There's a couple pages later, it went through something else like that. But again, it felt like to me, and tell me if I'm wrong, that these numbers were not what is really needed in this community, but a much larger, here's what we think is overall, and we think you deserve this share. Am I reading that incorrectly?
Were they -30G?
No.
No,
That's
No,
the-
I
that's
think,
the
I think
latest.
that's right, because they're looking at it from a more broad perspective. You know, there's no way that we're gonna come up with 1,200 units. So the question that we asked ourselves is really the question that you're implying, which is, what can we realistically do? And that's how we got to our own number, you know?
Yeah, so and I appreciate that our own number for the plan is much smaller than that, but I just, if we're going to the state and say, this is what our plan, and the data says, here's what we need, if we don't really feel like this is what we need, which is different from what we're saying we're trying to get to, it creates a tremendous gap that I think is not realistic.
The feeling at the legislature, as I understand it, is there's a demonstrated need for 87,000 more affordable units across Connecticut. And in their mind, towns don't get to raise their hands and say, none for us, please. You know, so the question from the state to the towns is, how are you gonna do your part? So that's how we came at this. But in looking at those analyses, we realized there's no place to put 1,200 to 2,000 units now. Maybe that's something that can happen over the next 20, 30 years, I don't know. But we're trying to look at 5 or 10 years ahead with this plan. And then to say, well, you know, what do we really have the possibility of doing?
But with regards to that, would this be a line that in our plan that we're submitting is really inappropriate? Because how much do we need, and then the first line is 12 to 2,000 units. We know that we're not gonna achieve it. We know that was a plan, a number that was given to us by the state, because we can't raise our hand and say we don't wanna do our part. But then to have it there in our plan might not be in our best interest.
Yes, but this is not a plan forever. I mean, how often are we required to do this, David? Every
5 years.
5 years. So I'm looking at it more that this is a short-term plan, right?
It's a
With
5
long-term issues that we have to recognize, but in the short term, what can we do? And hopefully the state will accept that, right?
But does that suggest in the long term, we think we need another 2,000 units?
No.
Because I would argue no.
That's what's suggesting it, but that's not.
And that's kind of my point, is like, if this is, so I know the state's trying to do some things.
It's not arbitrary, these are not arbitrary numbers.
Oh, no, I didn't say, no, I see how you got to that, right, and there's a couple of different studies, and
Yeah.
that's why you have the, no, I totally understand. But that's somebody else saying, here's kind of your share. I feel like this is our plan for our community. And
Yes.
wouldn't we wanna have something that's realistic for our community, and maybe it doesn't completely gel with what the state plans are, but
It's our plan.
it's our
Well,
plan.
Of course, but, you know, we're kind of obliged to look at all the data to do this right. And these are actual recommendations from CHAPA, Open Communities Alliance, Regional Plan Association, Westcog.
But we want the recommendations of our planning and zoning and
Hold on,
our,
Barbara,
and
I'll
our,
write
and
well-
that
our,
down in a second.
and the board of selectmen and our town.
Yes,
We don't,
that's
why do
in
we wanna
here.
give up control to Hartford to
Yeah.
tell us what
Yeah.
what the pressure?
Don't want to do that.
Well,
Well, that's what we're doing. You're saying that-
8-30G took the control.
Well, sure they did, and that needs to be worked on, and, you know, there are, as David said,
That's,
there's people that are, you know, there's initiatives that are taking place now to modify it, or at least make proposals to it. But
hopefully, yeah.
right now, but for the state to say, there's how many, 87,000 subsidized units that we need throughout the state, and our fair share of that is 2,000?
Oh, I don't think they said that,
Well,
did they?
No.
What
The state has said is that 10% of our housing stock should be in the affordable
no,
definition.
that's under
And that-
830G.
I know, that's what the state has said.
Right, no, but under the new proposal, the research that David just
Cited.
cited,
Mhm.
is that there are 87,000, the state said we are short 87,000
Right.
affordable / subsidized housing. Okay, and our fair share of that, based on our 25,000 people, is is how much?
No,
12 to 22,000 units.
that's not the proposal at the moment. The proposal at the moment is the one I mentioned before, I think it's 5709, and it says, and this is the one that, it hasn't been approved yet, it's going to the floor.
We are running up, it's 10 after 9, and
Yeah.
I know we have a whole nother discussion to go through,
Yeah, okay,
so.
This may warrant, because I'm not comfortable with a lot of things in here, if this is gonna go as our plan.
Well, then, we need to get that marked up copy back to them for their
Yeah.
review.
Right, and I think maybe we should do a separate special meeting to go through this.
But just to get,
But hopefully you just get in the spirit, again, we're not gonna wordsmith this now and all of that, but maybe get the spirit of some of the concerns that we have, and maybe that'll come up in the.
well, are you
meetings as
suggesting
well.
that we would deny that these numbers exist?
No, not at all.
Okay.
Now that they
Reject
exist.
We're not saying that we're gonna meet these numbers.
You reject them.
Barbara, go ahead.
Sorry, Barbara.
I have been trying to speak for a long time. Listen, Dave, in the plan, I mean, when you say the 2,000, you know, unit, I mean, it should be specified state, I mean, the state's idea, not that's our need. And somehow in the plan, it should be reflected back to the state, because this is going to the state as part of our plan, that, you can't just assess, I mean, you can't just apportion, housing units because of a population. You need to have issues like where the transportation is for these people.
Right.
And I mean, it's 2,000 units. What
Yeah,
the hell?
Well, what we say in the plan is, given the limitations of available land and the cost of development, it's highly unlikely Ridgefield could achieve this number within 10 years, let alone within the 5-year scope of this plan. So, we're saying this is,
It isn't just the cost of land, it's the services provided by the state in terms of transportation and infrastructure that make it impossible.
Yeah, and so maybe one way to think about it is, and you made a very good point before, you're saying, do we not show that, this is data from, these various studies, right, there's the Connecticut Housing Finance Authority, so I think it's okay to say, here's what these sources are suggesting, but when we come back and say, right on page, whatever, maybe it's 7 of the overview, it says, how much do we need, and you do say, analyses cite the gap of, 1,200 to 2,000, and the next page, you say, but we think, something, much less, 125 is realistic. So I just wonder if there's some distinction that says, here's from these external sources that are saying that, without saying, we think that's our actual need. And then to come back and say, here's what we think is realistic. Because it sounds like, the way I read it, it says, here's what the need is and here's what we're gonna do, right?
Right.
And the way I would prefer to say it is, yes, there's data out here that says, here's what a potential responsibility of Ridgefield is. That's great, we think for our community, here's something that's realistic, right? And maybe it's a fine distinction, but I think, certainly when I read through that, I was looking at these numbers and I said, well, that's not realistic, it's
And
just,
if you look at the gap analysis on page 27, that's where it explains what I just.
that's right, yeah, that's exactly what I'm looking at.
That's the Open Communities Alliance, and they've come up with a number for Ridgefield is 1,241, and they have another one here, our proportion of the gap comes to 2,260. So, these are the things that, those are real numbers that the Open Community Alliance is putting out there, and that's gonna be expected of us, and I'm saying we should look at the town's needs, what we need and what our capacity is for infrastructure and the types of housing that we need, and come up with our plan and submit it to them. Not necessarily be submissive to what Open Communities Alliance and the other pieces of proposed legislation in Hartford is. Well, that's my, that's one.
I don't see how we're being submissive, we're just saying this is what the numbers that they came up with. We have something different.
Okay, well, as long as we're very clear on what our proposal is and what's
Yeah,
different.
you understand what they're saying, right? I mean,
understand.
you understand what Dave, what Sean and Bob just
Yeah.
said, because it says how much do we need, and the number's right there, and that's somebody else's, that is what someone else thinks we need.
That was a number assigned to us.
Exactly,
Right,
And
those
it's
were,
not
those were
what your
studies that were
analysis-
done, right?
right,
Yeah, but the heading is,
Right.
what our needs are,
Mhm. Okay.
so.
so that needs to be changed also.
Yeah, got it. So, those are the gap analyses. The waiting list for the RHA is measured in years, and we have the latest numbers in the plan here. 8-30G, if we were to meet the 10%, we could add 656 units, and that would get us there, but there's no way we're gonna get to 656 deed restricted units. 102 additional housing equivalency points are needed for a second moratorium, and that is within reach. So instead of saying, what is the absolute number we need, it's pretty clear that we need whatever we can build, and we can't build enough. So let's look at it this way. So if we do nothing, right, which means that we're just continue to be subject to 8-30G, based on historics, we should see 17 deed restricted units in 5 years. If we make changes to zoning and infrastructure, we could see 15 to 20 units through transit-oriented development in Branchville, through middle housing, and through some adaptive reuse. If we are proactive, in other words, actually build something ourselves, we could generate 70 to 80 units of affordable and housing for people with disabilities. So we think it's reasonable in 5 years to look at additional 125 units in town, however we, from various sources.
And that's what my discussion today with the COG and Reading is about, the sewer plant and the transit-oriented development.
Right. Yeah, the state's
Because
really high.
therein lies, and because as Barbara was saying earlier, you have your rail transportation and you have bus transportation up and down Route 7. It also comes through the center of town now. Hart is experimenting with
I
that.
saw that.
Yeah, so that kind of service, I think goes hand in hand, not only with affordability, but with a lot of young people coming out of college, and, you're looking at $5, $6 a gallon for gas, and it opens up the employment corridor in a much greater way than putting affordable housing on Berry Avenue, right? I mean, where are people gonna work? How are they gonna get to work? Your
Cars?
well, that's my point, exactly. If you take the car off the road, which we're trying to do, if you get people on the public transportation, which we're trying to do, so your smart growth, as the state of Connecticut has called it, delivers that transit-oriented development
Absolutely.
that can satisfy a lot of the questions that you brought up here.
I'm very glad to hear that this is now a conversation at the regional level.
Right.
And just being a little more close to home with the being proactive, I would not want to see a replication of what happened at Meadows, because that had appeared to be,
Oh, the financial part of
the
it.
financial part of it was not handled the way that I think that was originally
Right.
proposed, and it has not been, it's been
It's better
more
now.
of a difficult
It's better
situation
now,
for us than.
but it's still, the financial model was found not to be a good one.
Right, so
Right.
that would not be a
Leave it at
model that
that.
we should,
Right, and
Replicate.
that's one of the reasons that we're doing an expansive feasibility study to see if, what the real numbers are, to see, to make sure that it would work before we move ahead.
Is that what this 70 to 80 units is?
Yes, it
And
could be Prospect Ridge.
See, again, I would object to putting that in our plan, because, I mean, the town hasn't even approved the sale or the donation of that property yet. So, I mean, we don't even know whether the town would approve that for.
I looked at it thinking it could be TOD.
It doesn't have to
That's
be.
why I asked the
You
question,
know,
if it's TOD,
I don't
that's
think
one
we're
thing,
calling
but
that
this,
Prospect Ridge,
Well,
are we?
No, but Prospect Ridge would get us 70 units or so
Something.
pretty quickly, yeah.
but
But
we
again-
haven't even agreed to, the town hasn't approved that for the use
Okay.
of affordable housing, and
Let's-
that needs to be done.
Well, then let's look at the rest of the proposal, because we're gonna deal with that.
But again, I would say, you know, to your defense, the way it's written, it's, you know, future condition, right? We could generate, that's not saying,
Yeah, we
you know, there's
will,
something
or where it
specific or
would be.
whatever. And by the way, whatever happened, so I know there was the feasibility study, I remember at one of your meetings, there was sort of an attempt to put on hold pending the submission of this, is that what it is?
Yes,
Okay.
we had gotten through the site suitability stuff, and we learned that there's an area there that's suitable for development.
That's right. But that's been on hold for, and.
That's on hold until we finish this plan.
Okay, so once this is submitted, that's gonna be brought back up, okay.
So, let's skip actually, because just to the.
And so it's just one, on this one page,
Of
8.
course,
So if we say if we're proactive, we could potentially generate 70 to 80 units,
Yeah.
right? But then we have a goal of 125.
but,
So-
yeah, so what we calculated was, these are all additive, so if we do
Oh,
nothing.
it's-
which
I
is
see, I
70.
see, okay.
If we make zoning and infrastructure changes, we could see another 15 to 20. If we are proactive and actually get involved somehow in building something, then we could see another 70 or 80. So it seemed reasonable to us to look for a goal of about 125 additional units over the next 5
That's
years.
right. Just the way I read it, it didn't read as additive.
Cumulative.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, I agree.
So that makes sense, I agree with what you're saying, but it just
great.
didn't jump off the page that way. Okay.
All right, so let's skip the page 9 and go right to the strategies and tactics, because that's the real important stuff. So, one is to create more assisted housing. In other words, not 8-30G, but either built with government funds or actually subsidized through some sort of a housing authority, something like that. So, there is undeveloped acreage on site to expand Ballard Green.
Where is that?
There's 2.2 acres right behind it.
Yeah, it comes off Katuna Street, but
Yeah, you
Is
need
it-
that for fire. You
For
need
what?
that, you need that for coverage, or with that,
Yeah.
they had to use
I
that.
think that was a zoning
It was a
issue in
zoning
terms of
issue.
units per acre.
Right.
But that's included in that.
Right.
But
So
you need
you would
that,
need
you can't develop that. That's-
Because,
Because they needed that to get, build the additional, what was it, 20 units? When they added on to Ballard Greenland.
How many units are there now?
I guess it was
70?
17.
70 or 72, something like that, yeah.
I think there were
So-
64 originally, so I don't think we added 20, did we? Was it 20?
It was it was before I
Well,
went on the board.
That
That's
could
the
be an
reason,
issue,
that's
so that
why.
should be checked out.
right, but there are,
For zoning regulations.
right, but zoning regulations could be changed. There's
Well,
also
yeah,
friendly
it's
attached
just, you
32.
could build that out assuming
And I'm not
zoning
saying
changes.
put
so
50
forth.
units there, but it might be a place to put 5 or 10 or 15 units that would serve a
When you,
particular.
based on the acreage and the number of units you have, that's, that property is.
Right,
maxed
but
out.
what he's saying is if zoning were to change and allow greater density there, then you could do it. But today you can't.
Yeah, today you can't.
Right, today you can't. Tomorrow maybe we can. To create, so develop acreage on site to expand Valley, complete the feasibility study of Prospect Ridge site and pursue if suitable. Advance development of the half-acre site on Halpin Lane for approved ability beyond home for disabled.
Yeah, that falls in their court.
Yeah, we've been talking to them about it, and, you know, there are some issues, but there are also some possible solutions which can be reviewed. Then other
So
regular.
we should put down something about the Branchville TOD or something here, right? Because
Oh, it's in
that
here.
is-
We'll get there.
But is that,
This is specific to assisted housing, I think,
Yeah,
right?
that's
oh,
assisted
just
housing.
this assisted,
Right.
okay.
So
got it.
assisted housing means that they either get like a CHAFA mortgage, or it's through a housing authority or some other government-funded housing development. So what do you call it, Section 8 Housing Choice Program. We only have a handful of those in Ridgefield, but that would be counted as government assisted as well. So on the regulatory side, an inclusionary zoning regulation makes sense. Lots of towns like Ridgefield have them. And what they do is they require multifamily developers to either set aside a certain percentage as affordable, or to make a payment in lieu to a housing trust fund. A number of towns have done this with great success. As you've seen, we proposed one, it's on the docket with Planning and Zoning Commission. And we'll be coming back to you with that. But this would be something that they would do, is pass an inclusionary zoning regulation. Create an incentive to extend 8-30G restrictions perpetuity, because right now they're 40 years. But we've lost them. Now, the next one doesn't come off until I think 2046, your last term.
That's another one, keep going.
And, there's no reason that we can't ask developers to extend them to perpetuity so that our kids and grandkids.
One of the things we've always looked at is that there are many units in our community that could potentially qualify from a financial perspective, but because they're not deed restricted.
Yeah.
So I find that a fault of 8-30G, because what you need is housing that's affordable. That's what the affordable housing statute should be. It shouldn't require that they stay in perpetuity
Well, let me tell you.
or have a deed restriction.
Let me tell you the reason for requiring deed restrictions. So you could have a house that has an affordable rent. It's a 2-bedroom apartment that goes for $1,400 a month, let's say, which is well below market. How do we know who's living there? Could be somebody earning $200,000 or $150,000 a year that lives there, wouldn't qualify for it. So one of the reasons for deed
Yeah,
restrictions.
that's what part of the qualification is, that
And there's reporting requirements for that.
Right, but that's why they deed restrict it, to make sure that the housing that's affordable goes to people who need it, correct?
Right.
But when you look at a lot of our units in town, they'll reach a maximum in good times and a minimum in low time. And you'll see that move over time. It doesn't really go that high and it doesn't go that low. And that constant, to me, is something that should serve in place of, and we can show that. I've talked to Al Garston.
If we can
It's
find a way to
incredible.
make sure that people,
Well, people don't want it, because I almost got hung from the flagpole because I suggested it.
Casagmo, I saw that.
I'm not gonna name names.
But to that point, I mean, I
There's
understand.
I'm sorry.
Right,
There's
no.
single-family detached homes as well that are in that range all the
Yeah.
time. And don't forget, they do increase the limits. Actually, they're coming out now in April again, the new limits for this year.
For Chaffee,
So-
you mean?
Not Jaffa, for the affordability for 830G. So those are changed annually. So it can go up a little bit,
Mhm.
but
Yeah.
it's still, they're affordable.
Absolutely.
But
But,
we have a lot of those houses here, and that's really.
And we're not given any credit for it.
Right, and that's
Exactly.
really where the focus should be on trying to amend 830G so we can get the appropriate credit for what their objective is, to make sure that we have affordable housing for, all the demographics that you spoke of. We have it, okay? We're just not getting credit for it because it's not deed restricted, but like we said at the very beginning, we have a wide diversity of housing here. And that's what should be a part of our plan, and that's what we should be, fighting up in Hartford to get them to make those amendments. Rather than look at building large, subsidized apartment buildings. That's not what a lot of these towns are about.
Mhm.
But
Well, it's
We
that
have a mix of
point.
solutions.
I understand why you would want the restrictions to be, made to be in perpetuity. But on the flip side, if there was a way to acknowledge the affordable units that we already have, and the owners would be willing to, acknowledge that they're affordable and not have to have deed restrictions and only have to have them in place for X amount of years, so that there's more of a, so that they don't feel like they're just signing their deed away and not ever gonna be able to relook at it, that might be an area that we could start getting credit for, housing that is affordable here, that isn't being labeled as
When
affordable
we
housing
discussed
right
it, we talked also about incentivizing that
Exactly.
with some kind of a property tax.
Yeah, it's gotta be
that's-
something, because otherwise, yeah, why would they?
Right,
Yeah.
and that is the kind of thing that I think we'd like to see in the plan,
It's in the plan.
because, well, no, it's not in the plan, because we're asking them to extend it to perpetuity, and we want the the other side to be looked at with the, with the acknowledgement that these could be, labeled affordable, because they are affordable, but they're not qualifying as affordable, because they're not being deeded
They're not
as
deed
affordable.
But you understand that if you have somebody making a lot of money living in an affordable unit, that's not considered an affordable unit.
And I don't want someone who's making a lot of money living in an affordable unit. I
Okay.
want somebody who needs to have an affordable housing unit, get an affordable housing unit, and for us to get credit for the fact that
So-
the affordable
And
housing
it
unit is
may go
there.
like that.
So how do you make sure then that the person who's living in it
Well,
qualifies
that's why you're
for
the
it?
chairman of the Affordable Housing
Well,
Committee, because you're the one that's
they
gonna
have
figure
to-
that out.
Well,
They have
they have a
qualified.
report.
Okay, we have a,
They have reporting.
Right.
I know, you guys have gone through all of this probably, the committee.
No, not in this,
The Affordable Housing Committee.
Oh, okay.
well, I'm sorry, what's the question?
I said a lot of this discussion, I'm sure, took place
Yeah,
at
yeah.
the Affordable Housing
So-
Committee as well.
Then let's jump on to the next page, or actually later on this page. Perpetuity, create a housing trust fund, and we just want to get in line for the ARPA money to see that. So consider us.
There is a line.
Yes, I know there's a line, but we're in it. Offer an incentive to deed restrict ADUs. This is something that we can do. In fact, we came up with a solution that may work, not just here, but in the state, which is, the way it works now, when you deed restrict it for a certain number of years. Could be perpetuity, could be 20 years, 30 years, 10 years, it depends. Not everything is restricted by 8-30G, there are other opportunities to restrict. But what we said was, a homeowner who builds an ADU is not gonna want an encumbrance on their deed, right? Because if you have a deed restriction that goes out 30 years and you're trying to sell your house, this is gonna hurt the market value of your house. However, you know how the town has a covenant that will allow you to set aside part of your property as undeveloped and get a modest tax break for that? You can do the same thing.
Conservation easement?
A conservation thing, yeah. We can, and I checked this out with DOH, people can agree to deed restrict something until transfer of property, or even if a 5-year limit, something like that. So if there is naturally occurring affordable housing in the form of ADUs, and that's a good source of affordable housing, deed restrict it with this covenant, and then the covenant goes away. When the covenant goes away, you can no longer count it, but you can count it for that
For that
time.
time, yeah. Yeah, that seems interesting. So we recently, we had some zoning changes to encourage more ADU.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea of, is that being picked up, or people?
They raised it from 900 to 1,200 square feet.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's incentive, I
yeah. that's
I
right.
doubt it
Yeah,
There's no incentive for that.
No.
You have to have 3,000 square feet
in the main.
in the main unit
Yeah.
to,
But there are houses that exist that don't have the 3,000 but have an ADU.
then you have a 900 max. But you can, now they also increased it to 2 bedrooms,
Mhm.
which I think is really good. Because there are a lot of, single moms, single dads, and a place for them and their kid. So if we're going to ask homeowners to do that, to deed restrict their ADU, we have to give them something in return. Doesn't have to be a lot, because we're telling them it's not gonna affect the marketability of their property, but they will have an annual reporting requirement if they deed restrict it. So that will take them a little time, so they should,
How many of those units do you think are out there?
well, I should know this number off my head, because we just did a survey
I mean, is it to the point of getting us
ADUs.
close to another moratorium?
No, but here's something that people don't realize about ADUs. If you build an ADU and your mother moves into it and you don't charge her rent, that's an affordable housing unit. Because think about it,
Mhm.
she would have to be paying rent somewhere else. You could deed restrict it affordable as long as your mother lived there, and the town could count it, you could get a tax break on it.
Like at what? the tax break.
Under
Well,
this
and an
incentive that
incentive.
he's trying to,
Oh,
that he's doing great
oh,
to.
oh, not today.
If we do that,
No, some kind of.
Wait, tax break?
A very modest incentive,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have to be a lot, because we're not asking a lot. We're asking them to
Right.
qualify and fill out an affidavit once a year. But in return, they can get something, and then they can flip it off when they want to sell the house.
Got it.
Or if they decide to rent it out at market rate. Um,
MSDD,
Yeah, so that's the Main Street Design District where the Elms units went up, and in the corner of New Street, I'm sorry, not, of Gilbert and Main, where those units went up. That's a floating zone that planning and zoning created that allows, I believe it's 6 units per acre. There's no affordability requirement in that. So, which boggles my mind. I don't, every other town that does that kind of thing allows or requires something back from the developer. We require nothing. We need to
a
have a
payment
say.
in lieu of.
A
for
payment in
example.
lieu, something, yeah. I mean, those two developments could have generated a lot of income for a housing trust fund in town. And offer reduced building permit fees to builders and developers for affordable units. And that may not seem like a lot, but if we're talking about our,
We're at 9:35, just.
I'm gonna wrap up our housing trust fund.
Pushing an hour.
Finally, develop.
Not that this conversation shouldn't go on, but I think we need to have.
I think we need to have another meeting.
We can
Right, couple.
call a special meeting.
We're gonna have to come back. Just.
Go to the last page, right?
So we're just focused on this.
Just to put it out on the table, and in the meantime, I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Pursue the strategies to implement TOD in Branchville, promote the Chaffa mortgage and ADU opportunities to home buyers and owners, create an affordable housing webpage. And this is interesting because this is what you were talking about earlier. Evaluate and consider the use of surplus municipal land. Wilton did an audit, you probably know this, and found that they had a lot more land than they thought about. And some of it they want to make open space, some of it they want to repurpose, and some of it they want to sell, which seems to be a perfectly sensible way to go about it. So one of the things we might consider is creating a committee to do that same kind of evaluation, and then apportioning the properties,
I have
investments to
the
the
Wilton
town.
report, I gave it to Jake.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting what they did. Anyway, I know we have a lot more to discuss.
I want to thank your committee.
So did this get voted on by your committee? Is this, was this?
No, this is the work product of our committee, so we were all on board with it, now that we're sending it out. But you have to vote on it, and planning and zoning.
But the committee agreed.
Yes, the
Go
committee
forward
agreed,
with it.
and the committee, I mean, this was a cooperative project, everybody had input throughout the entire process.
So, the public hearings again, April 20th and April 23rd.
It's not a hearing, it's not a
Public
legal,
information.
public information session
Right.
where we're gonna take people through the plan, and then I'm sure there may be a few people who have some
And the
opinions.
time again, Wednesday, the 20th
Wednesday
at
at
7.
7, and then Saturday,
At
this is
10.
next week, at 10 a.m.
So will you
Here.
modify this according to the dialogue that we've had tonight?
According to the dialogue tonight, according to our next conversation, according to public input.
Okay,
Yeah, we've got to get to a document that the town will approve, obviously.
right. Okay.
Thanks, Dave. And
Thank
again,
you.
thanks to the committee.
It's April 13th, by the way, we're not out of time.
Nope.
No, I know, that's why we got the public information meetings, and we'll do a special meeting probably right after that. You know,
Yeah, that's good.
Last week of April, in there.
Yeah, oh, actually, did you want to set a date for the meeting tonight? Because it has to be 35 days. in
No, this is just our meeting.
No, the hearing, a public hearing. If you want to do, you're not required to do a public hearing, but if you want to do a public hearing, it has to be 35 days notice. That's why I reached out last week, but you didn't have a meeting last week.
So, as you were saying, it's May 1st, you were saying, roughly, the first week of May. We have our annual town budget meeting the first Monday, and then the referendum on May 10th, which is.
As I understand it, 35 days, there has to be 35 days notice. So,
Yeah,
that's-
so,
Well, that's,
well, wait a minute.
so May 1st, but that's, no, we gotta be in, mid to late May.
you know, yeah, right.
So
And
May
that's very
18th
close
is
to-
the middle, is our.
Right, so
middle.
our hope is to have the finished plan then for the hearing. So that's why we move the other. meeting
Oh,
forward.
okay, okay.
So we wanna have
Follow you.
we wanna have the revisions done in time. for
I
the
think
public
we
hearing.
should do it on an off week of our meeting, if we're only having,
Right, because we only have the 18th, so there's this week in May.
right. Is the 26th too late for the public hearing?
See, I guess, even what you said is a little, you said like, we're gonna have the hearing with the final report, whereas I might have thought with the hearing and input from that hearing, you might still have shifted, and maybe not, but I know
Well-
timing is very tight.
But we're doing what would have been the hearings as public information sessions. So we'll have, in here, we'll have a meeting next Wednesday and next Saturday.
Yeah.
Public input on this draft, right? Then there'll be a hearing. And so we will have time between now and then to put together a final draft.
Yeah, but nothing, no revision following the actual hearing.
Of course, you can have revisions, it can be revised until you vote on it.
Yeah, okay. But then when would we vote on it, I guess?
So you're looking at a public hearing the week of April 25th? After your Saturday meeting on the 23rd?
No, 'cause it's gotta be 35 days.
35 days. If
After the
if we
23rd?
call a public hearing, we could do it tonight for 35 days from tonight.
From now, yes.
Right. It's the notice that is 35 days. So whatever date we pick, we have to be 35 days when we vote on it, to establish the date. It has to be 35 days out.
It's gonna,
You can vote on it at the hearing, I suppose.
well, then we're not taking into account the people, what they said at the
Yeah, you
hearing.
want
Right, but
a
we've got-
public hearing is to get input and to make any modifications. If there are 30 people here and 30 people are insistent on a certain change, then that should be reflected in the document, right?
Yes. Yes.
So,
Ideally, they would come out before that, to one of these next two meetings.
they might, but they
yeah.
may hear a lot of things in the next two meetings that
That's right, yeah.
So
is
then we
food for
need to
thought.
schedule it, so, yeah.
So it's the week of May 16th or the week of May 23rd, right?
Yeah, I think, is the 18th the earliest we could do it? Like, is that like 35 days from today?
35 days.
And we have a meeting that night at 6:30, I think.
Yeah, that's why I was trying to stay, because we'll run into the same thing.
Right.
I'm sure it's not gonna be a just no comment meeting.
Sure.
We're gonna have
Exactly.
A lot of people are
Oh,
gonna
there'll be lots of
comment, it's
comments,
gonna
yeah.
take a while, so to put it on our regular meeting schedule, I don't think is a good idea unless we wanna be here for a long, long time.
Do you want to go to the 25th then? Or do you think that's getting too tight?
Well, what is the earliest we could call it, based on tonight?
35 days from tonight.
Right.
Which I think is the
That's what I'm
18th.
asking.
We want to do like a Saturday meeting?
4/28.
Could
I
be.
don't know that you're gonna get a lot of people on a Saturday.
13th, so we got
And
one,
with baseball
two,
games, soccer, all
three.
this type of,
4.
That's 28.
So if we go to the 5th week, we could do it on the Saturday of May 21st.
My daughter's wedding, you're all
Oh,
welcome to come down to
it's
North
it.
Carolina. COVID postponed.
Well, we can do it on the evening of the 19th, I mean, we're meeting on the 18th,
Are you heading down there? Will you be here on the 19th?
or we can do it on the,
I'm
like you said,
leaving the
the
18th, but I'll
25th.
postpone my trip if I have
Or
to.
the 17th, if he wants to come in.
I
How
think
about
the
the
17th,
17th?
I think we miss, I think it's not
That's
right
right.
enough days.
Is the 17th 35 days?
I'm sorry to interrupt. I thought it was 35 days from when you gave it to the town.
The regulation is not
Oh,
clear.
okay.
35
I
days
thought you had
notice
said
is
that.
probably-
Okay,
Yeah,
because that would have
it's
changed the
35 days
date.
notice.
Okay.
So that, we have to count the day it goes in the paper, so we could do it in the News Times, I mean, that's not an issue.
Or maybe on the town website, right, would that
Nah, I
qualify as
don't
notice?
think that counts. The state hasn't recognized
Okay.
that yet. We continue to fight that one. The newspapers continue to fight
Newspaper
it.
can do that. I mean, yeah, so I mean, it looks like we're,
So if we
We
got
could-
it in for a Friday, let's say we set it tomorrow for like a weekend, right? So we would count 35 days out from this.
It's either the 17th is, I think, right at 35, but it could be,
but I think we'd have to go, the earliest we'd go was tomorrow, so that's why I was thinking it was the 18th,
Right.
would- yeah.
yeah, or the 19th. But
And then he's got, so could we just do the following Monday maybe, or Tuesday?
when are you back?
I'll be back.
I know when.
Oh, when?
Oh, whenever you can do it.
No, well, your wedding is when?
I'm coming back take a second.
The weekend.
Yeah.
He changed his daughter's
We
mind.
could, we
I
could
can't
schedule,
change the wedding.
well, we could,
Change
that's what I'm
the
saying,
wedding.
you see, we can do it on the 21st.
If we did May 25th, is that too tight to the June 1 submission for any changes that might have to be made?
No, as long as you can vote before
No, June 1.
June 1, sorry.
Yeah.
So the 25th would be good, because at that point, it's gonna be tweaking of what we need
Hopefully
to
it's
change,
tweaking.
right? So why don't we do it the 25th?
Okay, I don't have a problem with that, as long as it's okay with the committee here.
Yeah.
So should we make a motion to have a public hearing, or are we gonna, right?
Yes.
Make a motion to have a public hearing on the affordable
Affordable
housing
housing plan.
plan for May 25th, Wednesday evening at 7:30?
Yep.
Is that good?
Second.
Just looking to-
Barbara, you with us, does that work?
I'm sorry, what did you say to me, Sean?
We are scheduling a public hearing for the affordable housing plan on May 25th.
Right. That's fine with me.
Okay,
Great.
so we have a motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you the committee too for all your work. Appreciate it.